we were having a brief conversation via text, the guest here, and he had brought up two tunes, and I asked him, the gentleman, what his favorite genres were, so I figured I'd come up with an idea by the way of introducing this famous broadcaster that it's been familiar on so many networks over the past almost 4 decades. We're talking ESPN, NBC, CBS, Universal Sports, you name it. And this is what I came up with. So here is our guest intro for the Thomas Loop Radio Show on AM 1440 WJJL. There is just no way that this is his last dance. He ran a 4:07 mile on his way to being inducted into the Boston College Athletic Hall of Fame in 1984. A lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, he served in Vietnam as an artillery forward observer, all while becoming an all-Marine track and field champion, competing internationally representing the USA. He's the first to be inducted as a commentator into the Running USA Hall of Fame. He's the first broadcaster to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award for the prestigious Penn Relays. He's a 4-time Emmy Award winner in track and field and sports journalism commentary, having worked for major television networks, ESPN to name one, since the sports network launched in 1979. A commentator of 4 decades, he has covered nearly 40 NCAA indoor and outdoor track and field championships, 4 World Track and Field Championships, and 7 Summer Olympic Games in track and field. Among the major marathon championships, he's the voice of the international feat of the Boston Marathon for Universal Sports. He is the voice of track and field. Larry Rawson. That is correct, and Larry Rawson is live with us on line 1. Good morning, Larry. How are you?
Good morning, Tom. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and that wonderful music, and I wish I could have invited you and all of the listeners in the 80s to our BLT party in the Hamptons. We danced to that music, and the BLT, by the way, and a woman came up with this idea from her days in college, and she said BLT stands for black tie, lingerie, or toga. You had to wear one of the 3 to get into the party.
How we've taken the turn away from sports and into laughter and happiness. Larry Rawson is live with us here in the Thomas Loop Radio Show on AM 1440 WJJL. Larry, let's talk briefly about the upcoming IAAF World Championships to be held in Beijing, China.
Well, it's a tremendous meet. I think it will give. If some distance races don't turn tactical, Tom, which they sometimes do,
right,
but it may be the best quality overall world championships we've ever had. And I say that based on performances from many, many athletes in many countries leading into these world championships this year. I mean, the Monaco meet that was held just about a month ago, from a quality standpoint, ranks among the top 3 ever one-day track meets in history, and it was tremendous. The world record was broken, just as one example. Almost broken in the 1,500 meters, the metric mile, was broken in the women's 1,500 meters. And a gal from Ethiopia, Genzebit Dababa, wound up running the equivalent of about a 4:08 mile. Think about that. Isn't that incredible? A woman running a 4:08 mile.
Yes, it is.
So the talent is there, and I think we'll see some great racing and great throwing and jumping over in Beijing.
Now, you've covered 4 IAAF World Championships and 7 Summer Olympic Games. What is the experience, if you can encapsulate that to the listeners on the air right now? You're listening to the Thomas Loop Radio Show on WJJL AM 1440, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, New York. Going back into it, what was your experience like just covering the finest overall athletes on the planet?
Well, I tend to work, there's been a few exceptions when NBC's needed an extra commentator. I have gotten calls, but I work for ABC, ESPN, so NBC has the rights to this. So unfortunately, I won't be there, but I have had the good fortune of working for Westwood One, which does Monday Night Football and the Masters Tournament and a lot of other things. And they have the radio rights. They're tied in with NBC. So long story short, I've had the honor of doing, as you say, 4 World Championships that were on ABC, and in 7 of the last 8 Olympic Games. And you can imagine the thrill when you're sitting there and you just keep pinching yourself and saying, I'm just a little old guy from Arbordale, Massachusetts, and I'm here sitting on the finish line calling the 100 meters at the Olympic Games. And you just keep saying to yourself, what an honor. Oh, my God, don't screw this up.
Yeah.
And, you know, the memories are amazing when you look back. I can so often feel the electricity in the stadium when a Usain Bolt gets in the blocks, or anybody, and in the women's or men's 100 lines up, and the fastest person on the planet. And the number of flash bulbs that would go off, or iPhone flashes, or whatever you know instrument you're using. When that gun goes off, the whole place is just electric, and you never forget it. You just never forget that moment. I actually would rehearse in my mind what to say in that 100. Who did I think would get out of the blocks first? Who would I be mentioning? When would I segue over to somebody else drawing alongside that leader or that person? Who did I expect to be out in the lead? Because you needed 1 or 2 seconds to recognize, and you're over 100 yards away from doing this. So, and you're trying to discern who's got the lead by just a step or two, or even less, you know, from that distance. And then you're just trying to get it right as they come close to the finish. You're trying to anticipate the time. Is it an Olympic record? Would it be a world record? Is the wind legal? You explain that ahead of time and what that means. You make sure at radio you say, on your radio dial, they are running, the lane assignments go from left to right. So I do it differently with radio.
Yeah.
But it's a sensational time, obviously.
Larry Rawson is live with us, the voice of track and field. We spoke briefly before the Boston Marathon, and I would like for Mr. Rawson to bring back the inception of that title, the voice of track and field, and he has a very unusual story to how he has gotten to the point in which he is at today in broadcasting. I'm talking about a brief conversation at the Boston Marathon where they needed someone to come off the bench and quickly.
Well, what happened was pretty crazy. I had stopped my running career after I was 3 years as an officer in the Marine Corps, and the last year of which was spent in combat in Vietnam. And then I get out and I started working in the investment business, and I went to the finish of the Boston Marathon, and that's where I lived in the Boston area. And I still kept up my subscriptions to the publications, followed the sport closely, and knew what was going on. And as I'm driving to the finish line, Tom, all 3 stations that I was channel surfing on the radio had the same one bullet point to say on the leader, and it was not right. And they were all saying the same thing. So I get to the finish line, I'm waiting for some friends, and I look off to my left, and very close by is a roped-off area with yellow tape and 2 guys in there. One's an engineer, it turns out, and the other one was a commentator. And I said to myself, just go give this guy, I saw the guy put the microphone down. And I said, go just tell him what you know about the leader and then come back over here. I had no intentions, none, expectations getting on the air. That was not the goal. I just wanted to help the guy out. So I said to him, what do you have in the leader, Neil Cusack? And he said the same thing everybody else was saying. He's a student at the University of Tennessee. I said, actually, he doesn't go there. He goes to East Tennessee State in Johnson City, not the University in Knoxville. I said he's actually overaged by a couple of years. And he's not just off the campus as a runner. He's the national collegiate champion in cross country this year, and he's not an American. He's from Ireland.
Right.
Well, the guy just kind of flips out and starts firing questions at me. And long story short, the engineer gives him a cue and says, you're on the air in 5 seconds. And he turns to me and he says, what's your name? And I said, Larry Rawson. And he said, we're here with Larry Rawson. Tell us about the leader, Neil Cusack. And that actually started the career. The station called in and said, keep him there. And we did the next hour of the telecast from the finish line.
The best accident ever, seemingly, for you. Larry Rawson is here live on the Thomas Loop Radio Show. The podcast will be out at 2 a.m. I'll be able to cut and edit this interview as well. I'll post it on my main website, thethomasloop.com. Another question regarding yourself. This one sort of caught up to me yesterday when I was reviewing notes, and in regards to your
Marine Service and athletics for the Marine Service. What was that like for you when you competed for the United States in a different point of view as an athlete? Well, obviously you competed as a soldier, but the athletic side of it, what is that like?
Well, in college, when you're an athlete, if you compete at a national level, you've obviously got usually good training facilities, a good track, probably a good coach, trainers, all that stuff. And once you get in the Marine Corps, you're kind of on your own. We had a good facility. It was an old cinder track, but it worked fine. We had good places to run, but you had to pretty much devise your own workouts, or you and several distance runners you were training with would collaborate on what to do for the day. So it was more you pushing yourselves and figuring out what you could do on top of your regular classes that I had to attend at Quantico and the training that we had to do. So it was a significant change, and you had to motivate yourself individually more. You didn't have the school behind you and all that other stuff, but so it was difficult. And then my joke was that I ran a couple of races so poorly that the Marine Corps sent me to Vietnam, which was not true. But you know, when you're with a unit, which I was attached to, we just got our orders to go to Vietnam, and that was it as far as my running career. I had the honor of running on the Marine team for 2 years, and the last year I spent out in the front lines as an artillery forward observer. You're right out in the point. It is a dangerous place to be, and my radio operator, who was right beside me, got shot in the back on one of our firefights that we were involved with.
That's
so, yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that I made it home in one piece. Believe me, I never saw him again. He was medevaced out, and he did survive.
Yeah. Larry Rawson is live with us here in the Thomas Loop Radio Show on AM 1440 WJJL. We're broadcasting live out of the Niagara Falls, New York studios, the Niagara Arts and Cultural Center. So again, it's Larry Rawson over the phones. Boston College. You were inducted into their Athletic Hall of Fame in 1984. Were they in the Big East Conference back then in 84? They weren't in the Big East beforehand while you were competing, correct?
The Big East was not actually formed at that time. Right. However, in the 80s they were, you're correct, they were in the Big East at that time. So the track team was competing against, the Villanovas of the world and a number of other schools in the Northeast, Syracuse. They had teams, but as you know, the almighty dollar and football and so forth rule, yes. and now they're in the ACC, which in some ways obviously is a much better football conference, and from a basketball standpoint is very strong as well.
There's a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2011 from the Penn Relays. He's the only sports commentator and television broadcaster to have received the award. Describe what it's like at University of Pennsylvania Stadium in front of 85,000 people.
It is just a tremendous excitement. I will go back to the fact that my coach at little old St. Mary's High School in Waltham had a terrific career as a coach before he got to Massachusetts to this Christian Brothers school. And his high school team, before he was assigned by the Christian Brothers, and he was a brother, the school before this, his high school team in Brooklyn, New York, won the National High School Mile Relay title at Penn. How about that for an honor?
That's tremendous.
And so he decided, when I was a junior, to start a track team, and he said, I want you to see what it's like from the top. He said, I'm going to take you to the Penn Relays. And, of course, we looked at him and said, what's the Penn Relays? And what an experience it was to get down there and be kind of herded along the wall. And then they have so many races, as you know, Tom. It's race after race after race.
Yes.
And in the last 5 years, over 3 days of competition, they have had each year a minimum of 110,000 spectators for track and field in those 3 days. So, and back then the spectators, it wasn't that popular, but it was very well attended, and it was probably 80,000 over 3 days. But, I was so taken back, and I never forgot the experience, and I'm just honored to have had a long career with them as a commentator. And my senior year of college, we won the distance medley relay, which is kind of the featured relay championship of America at Penn. And and for Boston College, I anchored in the mile, and we beat Villanova, Georgetown, and a lot of other major track powers. So it was a great, great thrill for the school and for us.
Larry Rawson, the voice of track and field, is live on the air with us here at the Thomas Loop Radio Show, heard Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on AM 1440 WJJL. The podcast will be out at 2 p.m. Returning to the current state that is the IAAF, not very much a political type of person when it comes to his stance on things, but all of there were dozens of athletes not exposed yet. I don't know if it's on public record yet, for failing drug tests. The question to me regarding that is, were they tested positive for drug use, performance-enhancing drugs, and having those athletes that were in 2005 and 2007's World Championship games back and forth, was the legal process fully exhausted to the point in which those on the federation, the board, the administrative side of IAAF were able to say, hey, these athletes are tested positive, and a lot of them were retired too.
Well, they've retired since then, but it gets complicated. Just for a one-line comment, I will say that I believe that the drug testing equipment is getting better and better and more sophisticated. And what they're having athletes do now, and they have done for actually a good 10 years, is to save tests, and they retest them. And they're doing more and more blood tests that they're saving, and as the equipment and the testing gets more sophisticated, they then go back and test somebody from 5 years ago and retest these samples to see if there were cheaters then that the equipment could not detect. And that's what happened in this case. There was somebody who basically was a whistleblower and gave access outside of the IAAF to 12,000 blood tests, if you can believe that.
That's remarkable.
And it went all the way from the 800 meters up to the marathon. And it was all world championships and all Olympic Games going from 2001 forward. And out of those 12,000, they actually found about, and it was 5,000 athletes involved too, that got tested, and about 800 of them were what was called suspicious by very top testers who were respected in the sport. And there were many, many Olympians and world champion guys who had medals, both gold and other medals, silver and bronze, among that group. So the testing continues. It was just announced this morning that a guy that many casual fans may know, the Lord, is now a Lord over in England. Sebastian Coe has just been elected the head of IAAF.
Yes.
He headed up the 2012 Olympic Games for the country of Britain, and they all did a fabulous job with it. So we'll see what he can do here to try and clean things up with the sport. There are countries that are considered worse than others, Russia being among them. Turkey, for its small contingent of distance runners, has had a lot of positives as well, several of them coming out just in the last week. So there's a lot of work that has to be done here to clean things up in the sport.
That figure, 12,000, I mean, without any humor attached to it, it just has a CSI feel to it. 12,000, to be able to have the capability and the funds available to test these athletes for any sort of performance-enhancing drugs, that's just mind-boggling. To give you an idea of what the IAAF is like, listeners, his name is Larry Rawson. Any predictions for the upcoming IAAF World Championships, which is beginning August 22nd in Beijing at the Olympic Stadium?
Well, you know, there is, I would use the phrase, I think, a 50-50 chance that the great Usain Bolt does not win the 100.
Yeah.
It was in 2009 that he set the world record over there. And by the way, his football 40 in that race, I've done a lot of math on this type of stuff.
Yes.
And he's 6 feet 5 inches tall. I actually think he's about 6'6". The last time anybody said he was 6'5", he was 19 years of age, and my guess is he's still grown a little. But the point is that at that size, he covered the football 40 in right on 4 seconds flat, which nobody in football has ever come within a quarter of a second of that. That's how quick he is. And his top speed, Thomas, is right at 29 miles an hour. So imagine driving down a country road, looking out the window, and watch the trees fly by at almost 30 miles an hour. That's his top speed on two legs.
He would be outrunning, now I know you recall the old Gems, which is like 10 years ago, almost obsolete. He would outrun one of those cars. Just to give the listeners an idea, the small cars you would take from tourist venue to tourist venue, beach to beach, he would outrun the old Chrysler Gem cars. It just to give you, which leads me to this, Larry. You have a unique way of breaking down descriptions of what it's like to run at a certain speed, to throw at a certain length, to jump at a certain height, and you're able to get the listener on an even playing field, which in turn gets you indirectly gets you another following of listeners. What prompted you to give a description to the casual observer / listener to any major sporting event in athletics?
Well, I over the years, and of course, as you have nicely noted, I've done this for a long time. I keep looking for ways to win fans, and as I say to myself, create the wows. And a long time ago, I don't really know, what does that mean? 20 years ago, I came up with the analogy of how do I explain the high jump? How can I tell people how great these guys are, how high they jump? And what I came up with, and I don't use it every year, you almost need the right time, and you need an extra 10 or 15 seconds to say this, and I often don't have that. The video that I'm working against, you see the guy on the runway, and next thing you know, he's in the air, and you don't have time to drop it in. But when I get to it, what I like to say is the world record was set back over, at this point, it's almost 20 years ago, by Javier Sotomayor of 8 feet a half inch. I said most homes in America since the 60s have 8-foot ceilings. If that's the house you're in, take a look at the ceiling in the room you're in and imagine someone jumping over your ceiling.
In a horizontal plane of that. It's just amazing.
Exactly. It's not, we're not talking about touching a rim here. We're talking about getting your hip height up over that high. And trust me, when you're sitting down in a room and you look in it, it's got 8-foot ceilings. It looks even higher because you're sitting down. And I think there's a chance somebody will get that 8 feet magical height in these games, particularly a guy from Qatar named Bashim, who has been jumping very well. And he's skinny as a rail, and he can jump out of the room. But his winning jump will be close to 8 feet.
Yeah.
I like to try and portray exactly how good and how strong these athletes are. Adam Nelson, who got the Olympic gold medal in 2004 in the shot put, I remember saying to him once, he went to business school at Darden down in Virginia. We were chatting one day, and I said, bench presses like they do at the NFL football combine, 225 pounds. Have you done repetitions? He said, yes, I have. I said, how many have you done? And if memory serves me correct, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, he said the record in the NFL for training camp was 42 repeats of that. He said, I've done 62.
It's ridiculous. Unbelievable.
It shows you the great athletes that we
Yes.
have in the sport and how strong they are and talented.
His name is Larry Rawson. All major networks he's covered up. I'm going to take you over to the Boston Marathon, which you do the world and on national feed for Universal Sports. You work with the great Al Troutwig. If there are anything that you could pull over out of the decades that you've covered the Boston Marathon, what would be your top 2 moments of being a broadcaster in place in athletics and for yourself in regards to describing a moment?
One I would go back to was the thrill of in track and field itself, of calling the race live between a halftime of, I'm not sure if it was North Carolina versus North Carolina State. It was way back in 1983.
Yep.
There was a major blizzard in the New York area. The track meet itself got postponed a week. ESPN called me up and said, hey, we've already committed to a major basketball game. We're going to put on Eamon Coughlin's attempt to break 350 and be the first guy indoors to ever run under a 350 mile.
Yeah.
We're going to put that on live at halftime. So they cut away from the basketball game, put that on, and long story short, I did the math on the last lap and did all kinds of math calculations. I'm a math guy, and I knew whether he would have a real chance or not. Took a deep breath on the backstretch and said, he's got a real shot here to do this. It's going to be very close. And Coughlin ran 3 minutes 49.78 seconds and became the first guy under. And the crowd was, the place was packed and went crazy. And it was just a thrilling moment, obviously. The other great moment was Meb Keflezighi's victory in Boston going back just a year ago plus.
Yeah.
And, it was the first victory by an American man in the Boston Marathon, beating all the Kenyans, Ethiopians, and other top runners. And Meb, who always runs a smart, intelligent race, pulled away. The other guys let him go. And long story short, when they all decided to band together like a peloton and try and gain on him, he had too big a lead and had too much left. And he held them off over the last 600 meters and became the first American in over,
1983.
32 years or so, 33 years to win. And that was the year after the bombing. So how incredible was that? The running world in the United States was just on a high and on a buzz for weeks after that victory by Meb Keflezighi.
And the most remarkable thing attained from it, not only from an athletic standpoint, let's talk about an athletic shoe standpoint, that Meb became virtually a household name. It was almost as if a sub-type of running boom was reoccurring again to what he did for a certain shoe company and what a shoe company did for him, the marketing of that product for Meb Keflezighi. That was just amazing, everything that followed afterward. And he had a good race this year, too.
He did. Very quickly, it's just a fantastic story. If you haven't heard it, and our listeners, I think will find this amazing. I'm stunned by some of the stuff he told me. He grew up in Eritrea, which, if you look on a map on the east coast of Africa, is located directly above Ethiopia. And they were in a fight for control of the country with rebels who were coming house to house and approaching his dad and taking teenagers into the rebel cause. And his father had Meb and his children go out and sleep in the fields at night so that when they came, they could say, look around, there's no kids here. And so Dad says, finally, I've got to get out of here. We've got to get out of this country. And he takes off, and he goes to work in Italy and gets a job there and eventually brings over several of the kids. Meb said to me, he said, we were so remotely located, he said, in Eritrea. He said, when we moved down to a major city to get out of the area, he said, at that point in my life, and I was a 7-year-old, I had never seen an automobile.
Truly amazing.
I was just stunned with that. And so, long story short, the family eventually gets in 1987 to San Diego. Dad gets the kids up at 4 o'clock in the morning, of which at that point there were like 6 children. And he said, we are going to study English every single day. We're going to study your courses. He said, this is your opportunity of a lifetime. You are going to do well in school. And it started at 4 o'clock every single morning. Meb goes out for track, does extremely well, eventually runs 4:05 for the mile, and gets all kinds of scholarship offers, goes to UCLA and wins NCAA titles, and you know the rest of the story. It's been just stunning what that whole family has accomplished. Everybody's graduated from a 4-year university. One of the children still in 4-year school now. There are doctors and lawyers in the family.
And representation for Keflezighi himself, isn't his brother somewhat in a public relations / agent for him?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
He is also a lawyer himself, is his brother Howie.
Larry Rawson, I want to thank you very much for your time. From BLTs to the current state that is the athletics, once again, thank you very much again.
It's a pleasure to be with you, man, anytime.
All the best to you, Larry.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
That's Larry Rawson, the voice of track and field, in the Thomas Soup Radio Show on AM 1440 WJJL. We're going to get into the music momentarily. Right now, I'd like to